discussing Chapter 3, Iswaran the Storyteller of your supplementary book, Moments, Class 9. I know you're all set to go. So, let's get started. The person that you see on the screen is R.K. Laksman, the author of the chapter. He was a very famous cartoonist and a storyteller. He belonged to Karnataka. You must have seen his skills in many leading newspapers as cartoonist. He has contributed in one of the famous Indian serials, Malgudi Days. Now, let's start with the summary of the chapter. There are two lead characters in the chapter, Mahendra and Iswaran. Mahendra was a young, simple and unmarried man who could adjust in any kind of odd situations and conditions. Iswaran was his cook, who was attached to him and followed him everywhere he went for his job. He called him an asset. He was very good at telling stories and anecdotes. This entire story was narrated to Ganesh by Mahendra. We can assume Ganesh as Mahendra's colleague or a friend. Mahendra had to keep moving from one place to another in order to perform his duties. This time he had been shifted to a chemical plant. His job was to keep an eye on the activities at the work site. Mahendra would be up early in the morning and leave for work after breakfast. Meanwhile, Iswaran would complete all his household chores. He would have his lunch and read a Tamil storybook before dozing off. He had improved his narrative skills by reading up to that extent that he could bring the listener on toes and would leave him in suspense. He had mastered the art of telling the stories by giving imaginative descriptions. For example, instead of saying he had come across an uprooted tree on the highway, he would say he had seen such an enormous bushy beast lying across the road. As he grew nearer, he noticed it was a fallen tree with its branches wide open. Mahendra would stretch himself back in his canvas chair and listen to Iswaran's stories unquestionably. He further told another story of an elephant. The elephant entered the border of the town right away from the jungle, smashing all the stalls selling fruits, mud pots and clothes. People started rushing here and there in panic. After some time, the elephant entered the school in which Iswaran was studying. He was in junior class that time. The elephant had ruined many things in the school. All the boys ran into the classrooms and shut the doors tightly. Meanwhile, all the teachers had climbed up the terrace of the school building. After witnessing all this, Iswaran took the lead to deal with the giant elephant and grabbed a cane from one of the teachers and came down to face it. He quickly hit its third toenail and the elephant collapsed in few seconds. At such points, Iswaran would always leave the story unfinished to warm the meal for Mahendra, and he would only finish the incomplete story when he is reminded of. When Mahendra asked Iswaran of managing the giant elephant at a small age, he would proudly say it was a Japanese art to paralyze the nervous system of an animal for quite some time. And then a mahout was called out who took the elephant back. When Mahendra was having his breakfast, Iswaran asked him if he could make something special as it was an auspicious day on which they feed the spirits of their ancestors. That day, Mahendra enjoyed the most delicious dinner and complimented Iswaran on his culinary skills. Iswaran then further told Mahendra another story of a female ghost that appeared on and off at midnight during the full moon, and she carried a fetus in its arms. Mahendra asked him to see a doctor as, according to him, Iswaran was not talking sense and left from there to sleep. He thought that Iswaran now would be a little cautious with his unbelievable stories, but the next morning he was surprised to see Iswaran as cheerful as always. Though Mahendra had scolded Iswaran for telling unbelievable stories, but he was scared deep inside and would look outside of the window of his room and make sure things were right. One following night, Mahendra was woken up from his sleep by some moaning and unavoidable sound. First, he resisted to peep outside but got very scared the moment he saw the same female ghost Iswaran had mentioned in his story. Next morning, the horror of the previous night had vanished from Mahendra's memory. But Iswaran mentioned that he had seen him scared of the same female ghost while giving him his office stuff. A chill went down Mahendra's spine, which means he felt very nervous and frightened. He did not wait for Iswaran to complete his sentence. He quickly went to his office, handed in all the papers, and left the haunted place very next day. The chapter ends here. I hope, learners, this was fruitful for you.